The Illuminate Arts and Faith Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee wants to help you find your tribe. Do you get way too excited about quoting Wendell Berry or C.S. Lewis in conversations with coworkers? Does your Spotify playlist include hymns, a little jazz, and a whole lot of Andrew Peterson? Join your tribe at Illuminate March 31 and April 1 for education and inspiration from speakers Russ Ramsey, Douglas McKelvey, John Hendricks, and others. Find a complete list of session topics and ticket information at southern.edu/illuminate.
In 2024, I set out to meet as many poets as I could and spend an hour with each one. I got more than I bargained for, more insight, more clarity, more hope. It's proved to be one of the richest highlights of my life. 17 writers, 17 deeply human conversations that made me sit up and pay attention. Franz Kafka once said, if the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. And that's what I hope this new book will do. I hope it wakes us up, my friends. I hope these conversations will be the catalyst for something to be reawakened, re-enchanted, and reinvigorated. It's called An Axe for the Frozen Sea, Conversations with Poets About What Matters Most. I'm Ben Palpin, and I hope you'll come and listen in as I spend a little time with poets like Lucy Shaw, Malcolm Guite, Dana Gioia, and Lee Young Lee. Pull up a chair at the table as we dig into what it means to write well and to live well. An Axe for the Frozen Sea is now available from Rabbit Room Press. Visit the store at rabbitroom.com, or better yet, ask about it at your favorite bookseller.
We as parents probably need to think about how we're giving feedback and not give a trophy for everything. Like, not be critical, but like maybe ask questions about, hey, what were you trying to achieve with this?
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. Carolyn Leiloglou's new middle grade novel is Beneath the Swirling Sky, book one of the Restorationist trilogy. It's a book about art, creativity, and reclaiming the creative energy that comes so naturally to small children. It's also about a family of people who can go into old paintings and walk around in them. Like her main character, Vincent, Carolyn is the granddaughter of art collectors and the daughter of an art teacher. She's also the mother of 4 wildly creative children. Carolyn Leiloglou, I'm so glad to have you on the Habit Podcast to talk about your new book, Beneath the Swirling Sky.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me back.
Welcome, Prego. Let's just start with you giving the elevator pitch for this book. Tell me about this book. What do you tell people when they ask you what your book is about?
Yeah. So the short version is it's about Vincent, who is a 12-year-old kid who has given up on art until he comes to learn that his family are the last of the Restorationists, which is a secret society with the ability to travel into paintings and the duty to protect them. So when his little sister disappears into Van Gogh's The Starry Night, he and his cousin Georgia have to go in and rescue her.
Aha. So middle grade fiction. This is fiction, exactly. Correct?
It is fiction. It's technically classified as fantasy, even though it's, a version of our world, right? Every painting in the book is a real painting. Every place they go in the book is a real place or based on a real place. The grandfather's ranch is based on my grandparents' ranch and house. So yeah.
Fun. And so Vincent's, I love, by the way, that he goes into Starry Night. That's such a fun, the idea of going into that particular painting is especially appealing to me. How did you settle on Starry Night as the entry point for your characters?
I think that was an easy one for me just because it's my favorite. It's kind of been my favorite for a long time. And it's just kind of a painting that pulls you in anyways, right? If you have ever had the privilege of especially seeing it in person, it's just fascinating. It's so, the paint is so thick and the way the sky swirls, like Van Gogh has really captured the way a sky feels, right? Mm-hmm. Not like how it really looks, but like how it feels.
Yeah, right.
And I just love that about the painting. It has this sense of movement that kind of lends itself to being something that you could go into and like really feel alive. And
yeah, have you been to one of these the things where you step into the painting?
Yeah, I absolutely have. I felt obligated to go because
Sure.
I was in the middle of revisions of book one, or maybe no, actually I was in the middle of writing book two at the time. But I took excuse me, I took my 16-year-old son, who's an artist in his own right, and we really enjoyed it. It's not the same as seeing the art in person, but it is a very cool experience. I like what they did.
So you had already written at least book one before you even knew that such a thing existed as these immersive painting things?
I may have seen something on Facebook, like not knowing it was going to be a thing that traveled around. When I was writing book one, it was in the middle of 2020. So no one was going anywhere. No one was going to museums or to art exhibits. And so a lot of the research I did, I wasn't able to go places to research the book. I had to kind of look up everything online. And thankfully to Google Street View, they have a walkthrough of the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam.
Oh, really?
Which was one of the settings in this book. And I mean, thank goodness for that, because there's no way I could even get there in normal circumstances, not much less during COVID. So yeah.
You used the phrase a minute ago that Starry Night kind of pulls you in anyway. And we think it's not unusual for people to talk about a painting that kind of draws you in. I love the way you turn that into that sort of metaphorical language of being drawn into a painting. You're treating it literally here, right? People really are going into the painting. I guess sort of the way, is it Jill Pole? Who is it who goes into the painting at the beginning of...
it's so funny. In the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, I think is what you're thinking of. Yeah. And it's Edmund and Lucy and Eustace. And that was my favorite book growing up. And I did not even make the connection until someone mentioned that to me later.
Really?
Like, oh, just like in Voyage of the Dawn Treader. And I was
that's funny.
Oh yeah, I guess they do kind of go into the painting, but it's in the Restorationists, when they go into a painting, it literally is, it's like a painting, but alive, right? It still looks like a painting versus, when they go into the painting, they actually are going into Narnia and Voyage of the Dawn Treader. So it's, that's one of the
so I guess in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, it's just a portal to another world. And you're talking about actually entering into the painting.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so you mentioned that your main character, Vincent, who is named for Vincent van Gogh, and all the kids in this story are named for some painter. You say he's given up on art. And I'd love to hear you talk more about that. That's such an interesting idea. He's at the age when you start getting self-conscious, right? He's a 12-year-old boy. And he's got a little sister who's too young to be self-conscious. He's got a cousin who, for whatever reason, isn't self-conscious. I'd love to hear you talk about this idea.
Yeah. The idea is one from personal experience. So, I was never an artist, like a visual artist, but from the time I was little, I wanted to write. And I was trying to, write a novel when I was in 4th grade. And I wrote some stories for my little school newspaper in 5th grade. But then like right around middle school, like Vincent, I thought, I can't do this. I'm not good at this. It's hard. I was one of those kids that school kind of came easy for. So I thought, well, this is difficult. So I must not be good enough to do this, right? I did keep writing poetry, oddly enough, just because I had friends that also wrote it. So it seemed more acceptable kind of form of art to continue. But yeah, I gave up on art, and I really regret that now. I didn't start writing again until I had kids. And something about having kids, and that makes you do scary things. You kind of gain some confidence and wisdom and perspective. And, what I would love to say to kids who were in my situation, whether it's visual art or music or writing or whatever it is, hey, don't stop. Like it's hard because it's worthwhile, right? Yeah. Keep doing the thing, keep making art. What's interesting is Georgia, Vincent's cousin, you brought up that she is not self-conscious about making art. And that character is actually homeschooled. And I do think I'd see a little bit of a difference between kids that are at school feeling a lot more peer pressure versus homeschool kids have a little bit more time and maybe space and perspective from other people. I've actually seen, my own kids, like they share their writing or their art or whatever with other homeschool friends and receive a lot of encouragement, which is kind of amazing. So I do feel like homeschooling can be a little bit of a shelter for some people in a good way.
Yeah.
Shelter in a good way. Yeah. Like usually
shelter in a good way. Yeah.
Homeschool kids are sheltered. It's bad, but actually, there's a good kind of shelter as well. Right.
Yeah. One thing that Vincent specifically talks about is the encouragement that his parents gave or are giving to his little sister with her art. And as he's grown up, he's come to see his parents' encouragement as a lie, right? Because he's encountered critical peers or whatever it is that he encounters. I'm interested in that idea, right? The kid who's always been encouraged by his parents. He looks at his little sister's art that the parent puts on the refrigerator, I guess, and he sees that it's not that great, but the parents act like it's great. And I think I may be misrepresenting, but I think he's concerned about what his sister's going to discover when she figures out that her parents have been lying, that is really not that good. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. It's interesting because especially I think as kids, and probably as adults too, like we tend to value the wrong people's feedback of us, right? Like he's like taking the school bully's feedback as truth and what his parents say as lies. But I do think conversely, like as parents, when our kids are little, like, of course, we're going to like encourage everything they're doing. And because it is great, maybe for the age that they are, right? Like we're evaluating it with the perspective of time. But then if we're always continuing as our kids like age into maybe the teen years and we're like, oh, yes, this is every single thing, so wonderful, they're going to sense there's a falsehood there. Like there needs to be like a difference between when they work really hard on something and we can tell like, wow, this shows a lot of effort. Like I can see that this is really amazing. You need to be able to have a level that you can go to and say, so they can believe you, so that you're not saying like, oh, hey, this sketch, wow, this 5-minute sketch, it's so amazing. Like we as parents probably need to think about how we're giving feedback and not give a trophy for everything, like not be critical, but like maybe ask questions about, hey, what were you trying to achieve with this? Or like, just to know your child and know what kind of feedback they can receive, of course, but to actually have like a difference in that will help them along, right? Like, as they're getting older, right?
Yeah. And I think it's important also, to talk in terms of, looks like you really tried here. It looks like you really put on, and congratulate the effort.
Or find the one, like something that is really great about this one thing, right? Exactly. And what you're saying, like you really tried versus like a 5-minute sketch, like, oh, I like this element in it. What if you developed it further? What if you made this into, or have you thought about,
Yeah, there are ways to move kids into a growth mindset. Yeah. Instead of, the idea that somehow this art is good just because you did it, but I'm sure there are child development experts who could articulate this better, but in short, there are ways to encourage kids in terms of, in our own selves for that matter, in terms of effort as you continue to work to get better. That's what we can encourage. Rather than you're just I don't know. I guess I certainly detected the difference when I was young between, and maybe would have benefited more perhaps from feedback that was encouraging me to work to continue the effort rather than.
Right. Because it can be equally dangerous to give your kid the impression that they're this prodigy, and then they actually will end up feeling more pressure. Like, well, then I've made something that I can see is not good. Like, why is that? Right. Yeah. I can see that I made something bad. Or like when my kids say, like, I'm so bad at whatever, like drawing people or, playing this piece on the piano or whatever it is. I'm like, you know what? You get better at what you do, right? So if you're bad at drawing people, draw some more people. Like if there's something that you want to get better at, you got to work at it, So I think encouraging that growth mindset is, like you said, a huge factor there.
Yeah. You say you have at least one child who's really interested in visual art.
I do. Yeah. More than one, but yeah, so, my son is, I feel like, very talented at art. All my kids are super creative, I feel like. And then my youngest is, she's very artistic as well and likes collage. My third born loves to crochet and craft, and my oldest loves to write. Like they all are super. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm always amazed like how creative they are. Yeah.
Yeah. And what are you doing to encourage their creativity?
Yeah, I think so one thing is, it's one of the reasons why we chose to homeschool is to kind of give that space for having time to be creative. I try to, the ones who are interested in different craft type things, I try to make sure that they have supplies. We look for, maybe videos or books about how to get better at whatever it is that they're wanting to do. And then just kind of knowing when to give feedback and when not. Like I think as an author myself, like I had to step way back from giving feedback to my child who likes to write several years back because that was too much pressure because since this is my job as well. So, I would ask her, what kind of feedback do you want? Do you just want me to enjoy getting to read this, or are you looking for feedback? And so I think being clear beforehand with the older child is very helpful.
Yeah. Do you ask that every time she shows you something?
I do. She doesn't show me stuff that often. But usually I think she's not wanting feedback from me. She has friends that she shares it with that she gets feedback from. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. One thing that Vincent deals with is perfectionism, right? Yeah. What's your relationship with perfectionism?
Yeah, well, anyone who's been listening to your podcast for a while, if they heard our last conversation where we talked about my picture book, Libraries Most Wanted, would know them a bit of a recovering perfectionist. So, I think perfectionism can be a real roadblock for us. Not that we shouldn't work to get better at stuff. Like we're talking about the growth mindset, but feeling like something has to be perfect or it's not worthwhile. Kind of like that mindset I was talking about when I was in 5th grade and stopped writing. That it wasn't perfect. It wasn't an A+ 100. So I must not be good enough. And perfectionism, the lie perfectionism tells you is it has to be perfect or you can't do it at all. Right. And that's not what art is. Art is about experimenting, about playing. If my kids, they make a mistake in something they're drawing, you're like, oh, I've messed it up. It's like, there's no mistakes in art. How can you make this into part of your drawing or your painting? Like, what can you do? How can we, use that mistake and find something good from it? So,
Tell me about some mistakes you've made in writing and how you, do you incorporate your mistakes? Now the nice thing about writing is you can just edit, put it out in a way that's, that's
people
not the
don't
same
see all the
visual art. Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah. Cause I'm sure a lot of people feel like, oh, you have this book and it must have just come out this way. And they don't know how many millions of drafts I have, and even after, some people might be surprised, even after the book was under contract from Waterbrook, when I got my editor's feedback, she didn't say you have to cut these chapters or rewrite whatever. But the questions that she asked kind of led me to understand that I had like a whole series of several chapters that needed to go, needed to replot certain aspects of the book, and fill in different places. So I probably cut like a good 5 chapters from the book, which was painful.
Yeah.
But
is the book 5 chapters shorter, or are you saying you cut 5 and then added?
I probably added about the same amount. I know I think coming from picture books, I tend to be an underwriter and underdescriber. So my editor's always pushing me to add more descriptions or more like internality or more physical reactions, like that kind of stuff. So usually my books kind of grow as they go through revisions instead of shrinking. So so we did cut those, but then those same probably amount of words got added back. But a lot of that, I would say, exploration and backstory stuff did inform what I know about the characters going forward, right? Because they were explorations of who these characters are in different situations. So I knew things about the characters, even though those events didn't necessarily happen, which has affected book 2. So, yeah.
Can you be more specific about that without giving away too much?
Yeah. Okay. So, in the original book, when they first go into the Starry Night to try to find Lily, and that's not a spoiler since I already said it at least.
I think that's on the back of the book. That's on the book jacket copy, I think.
So originally, they actually went down into the town to look for her there. Since Van Gogh spoke French and he was in France during this time, the people in the town speak French. And guess what? Georgia does too. And so I found that out, as I was writing that. Oh, Georgia, actually, when I look up, what her parents do, they work for Interpol, and that's actually based in France. So of course she speaks French. She lives in France, like she's traveled all over, of course. So she knows snippets of other languages. So that's something that didn't really come up in book 1 anymore, but it was something that I knew about the character. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's talk about some content of the book itself. You got the distortionists, you got the restorationists.
That's right.
Tell me who the distortionists are, who the restorationists are. And by the way, this is book 1 of a series of how many?
3 books.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's probably easier to describe I guess I'll describe the distortionists first. So the distortionists, they're the bad guys, obviously. And they I see them as being in it for power, basically, right? They steal paintings, they leave distortions in paintings. And so that would be when they're inside a painting, like adding something to the painting that is against the artist's original intentions, right? That would cause the viewer of the painting, even if they can't visibly see the distortion, to feel differently, usually in a very negative way. And that those would be ripples that spread throughout society and cause negative things in society. And so the restorationist job is to stop that, right? So they restore paintings that are have distortions. So Uncle Leo in the book, that's his specific restorationist skill. He's a restorer, so he does that kind of full time. And then, but other characters, like, theoretically could help inside a painting to fix a distortion. And then they try to recover stolen paintings. So that's part of what George's parents do in their work with Interpol. But they have, this secret heads up by being able to use their restorationist gifts to find paintings more easily.
Can you give an example of the kind of distortion that a distortionist might do in your stories?
Yeah. So the one that one of the ones that they see in the book is one of the distortionists has painted a swastika on something, right? So that obviously is a very evil symbol. We have a lot of associations with that. And so someone seeing it from outside the painting theoretically would get those like ideas and associations, but the distortionists also can alter character, like people inside a painting, right? Painted people or other things. Yeah. There's a lot more of that in book 2, and I don't want to give away how interesting it gets, but there's a lot more.
Yeah. No, but I love this idea that because art creates culture, as you distort art, you are somehow distorting culture.
Yeah. I also think of it as like, the line between art and propaganda. I don't know if you've ever listened to a Vesper Stamper's podcast, Vesperisms, but she talks a lot about art versus propaganda, and it's kind of really informed my thinking about that. And any art can turn into propaganda, right? Like, and when it's propaganda for your side, you don't notice it as often, right? It's easier to gloss over. But I feel like it's kind of been a trend in modern films and movies and TV shows to be more propagandistic, right? Like whatever your hobby horse issue is, that it gets added to that show in a way that is not natural to the story. And that's what makes it propaganda, is it becomes preachy, right? In a way that's trying to inform your decision, like tell you what to think, instead of what art should do is ask questions and make suppositions and make you think, right? And not just spoon feed you those answers, right?
So you're coming at this story from a moral position. Is that fair to say?
Yeah,
you have a moral position that informs the way you tell the story.
Yeah.
How is your story? What's the difference between coming from moral position and writing a propagandistic story?
So everyone has a moral position, right? You're not an AI, right?
Yeah, it's not just I hope so. It just is necessary. It's just the way it is, right?
Yeah, you have a moral position as a person, right? Like you have values, and those values are going to inform your story. But there's a difference between having values that infiltrate the way that you craft a story and you're serving the story, versus like, oh, okay, I'm going to tell a story, but what I really want to do is make sure people know this, right? Make sure people get this point and understand it exactly, rather than a story that brings up like everything. You always learn better when it's your own idea, right? Like the Socratic method, right? Like bringing you to an idea that you form that opinion yourself, right? Through conversation, through thought, or whatever. And I think that's what good art does, right? It leads you to think or feel about something in a way that you're able to process and come to your conclusion, versus propaganda says, this is the way it is, and you have to accept my premise, right?
Yeah. Or I might distort the cause and effect, the natural cause and effect in the story in such a way that, or people might behave in ways that people don't behave in the world God made.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you're talking about this idea of, I mean, you didn't use this language exactly, but engage in the reader's judgment.
Yeah.
Creating at least creating the illusion that the reader has reached these conclusions on their own.
They need to have reached them on their own. I mean, like maybe I've been a helper, right? But like they need to be able to. Otherwise, first of all, I don't think it's going to stick. If you, just like kids who grow up in the church and then go out and, go their own way, they never came to their own conclusion, did they? They were just spoon-fed something and then they spit it out when they left.
Yeah.
You have to come to your own conclusion, right?
Yeah.
And that's the only way it's going to stick.
Yeah. You have an epigraph. You have two epigraphs, but one of them is from Picasso. Every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist once he grows up.
Yeah.
And of course, we've got this main character who's still a child, and yet he's starting to lose that innate sense of creativity. How so you mentioned that you lost some of your creative fire about the same age Vincent did. You said some of it came back after you were a mother.
Yeah.
How do people keep this alive? How do young people keep it alive? How do adults get it back?
Yeah. I think that creativity is something we all have, but it's something that needs to be practiced in order to grow it and to maintain it. So I know Jennifer Trefton always talks about having a sense of play, and I think that is probably a really good way. So, and people who have kids, I think if you're doing a creative action or whatever with your kids, that's always I think going to be encouraging to both of you. Like I cannot draw stick figures even, but I'll sit and draw with my kids sometimes, and we'll create something silly together. And I feel like that kind of opens up that sense of play for them. And maybe I'll get ideas too, or I think practicing that sense of play is really important.
Is writing the only art form that you do?
Yeah, I think so, probably.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say, no one would say I'm like an amazing like house decorator or anything. That was one of my mom's top art forms, I think. She was an art major actually in college, but yeah, she always had a like immaculately decorated house, and that's probably not me. I like to cook, but that's probably not an art form really for me either. So yeah, I think writing is probably my one and only. Sometimes I'll help Demetrius with a song, but again, that's writing. Words. So
hey, there is an audiobook of the story of Beneath the Swirling Sky, correct?
There is, yes. I haven't gotten to hear it yet, but I did get to help select the narrator, which was very fun and difficult.
Which means it's not you.
It's not me.
Okay.
I said I do not want to do it because I wanted it to be good.
Okay. All right.
I do not feel I have that specific skill. I know a lot of authors who do their own books that do a great job, but I don't think I would do an excellent job.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm very excited about to hear it.
Yeah. That's funny that you haven't heard it yet.
Yeah, I have not at all.
Maybe by the time this airs, you will have heard it.
Oh yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. And then tell me about you got a website for the story?
Yes. So if people go to therestorationist.com, there's more info about the book. There is probably still going to be where you can read the first chapter. I don't know if that needs to go down once the book comes out. But also I have a freebie for parents who are wanting to kind of delve more into looking at art with their kids. It is a Charlotte Mason style picture study with a restorationist twist. So if people are interested in that, they can find that at therestorationist.com. Scroll to the bottom.
Well, tell me what that means. A Charlotte Mason style.
So Charlotte Mason was an educator in, I believe, the 1900s, and a lot of homeschoolers modeled their homeschool on her educational model. And one of the things that she talks about is spreading the feast, and so that includes doing studies of music and of art. And so picture study is where you look at the art of a particular artist for several weeks in a row. You'll look at a different picture, and there's a certain way you go about that to really observe the picture well. But it's not complicated or onerous. But I've done this with my kids when we used to attend a homeschool co-op, and I feel like they still like recognize some of the artists that we looked at, which is a very cool thing. Yeah, all these years later.
Yeah.
But
that's neat. And so at therestorationist.com,
that's right.
Is the art available? The art that's from your story can you see that at that website?
No, there's not. I don't have the art there. In the back of the book, there's a list of all of the paintings that are in the story. There's not like printed copies of the paintings in the book because at least one of them is still under copyright, and it'd be black and white and not really worth looking at. But you could use that as a guide to go look at paintings with your kids, and yeah, very cool.
So is it copyright issues that keep you from being able to put that on the website? Those most of the, like, can you put a Van Gogh painting on a website? Are there issues there?
You can put a Van Gogh painting on a website. There's a Norman Rockwell. There are a couple of Norman Rockwells in there that they go through, and those are still copyright protected. And I know I think to me, it's like, I can't do all of it. So, so we're not going to do, we just have a list and people can look it up. Like, there are definitely things that you can find online, but they're not things that I could legally like put every one of them in the, in the website. But
all right, Carolyn, last question. I think you know to expect this one. Who are the writers who make you want to write?
Okay. I'm going to say Cassie Beasley. I just love her books. I think I said her last time.
Okay.
It's always the same people, right? I'll say, here's a new one. Kate Albus. She wrote Where to Hang the Moon. And it's just like such a touching, A Place to Hang the Moon. I would love to write characters that are as moving as those ones and as endearing. So maybe someday.
Katie Albus's characters, what's so great about them?
Gosh, I don't know. Like, I love the family dynamics between the siblings. I like sibling stories a lot. There's something Narnia-esque about her characters. I don't know if it's just that they're in England around the same time period, but something about it. Yeah.
Well, I have to say, I mean, I love the family relationships, the sibling relationships in your book. I think you did a great job.
Oh, thank you.
Of the way that Vincent feels responsible for Lily and their sort of sweet relationship with one another. So, I don't know Kate Albus's books. Maybe she's better at it than you, but I don't know. I think you've done a great job. So,
I appreciate that.
Well, Carolyn Leiloglou, thank you so much for being here. It's always a pleasure to talk, and let's talk again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
This podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. And all our podcasts are made possible by the generous support of our members. To learn more about us, visit rabbitroom.com. And to become a member, rabbitroom.com/donate.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.